Hello crafty friends, I'm Lien from Studio Kato and I'm so glad you're joining me again today. I have a super bright and colorful card to share with you guys using a lot of products from Pinkfresh Studio and doing some no-line coloring. I'm using the large flower stamp from the Thankful for Friends stamp set by Pinkfresh Studio, and I'm stamping that out onto Canson Montval 200 GSM watercolor cardstock using Ink on 3 fade out ink for no line coloring. I stamped it 3 times because this is a very detailed image and I really wanted to see all the detail when I was painting it. I'm actually using the Pinkfresh Studio inks to paint this in. I just smudged the ink down onto a slick surface. This is just a laminated sheet of white cardstock, which makes a perfect watercolor palette, by the way. And then I pick it up with a fine paintbrush and some water, and then I can just paint with it. I'm using the colors that are part of this month's Pinkfresh Studio challenge. If you don't know, Pinkfresh Studio always has a monthly challenge going on their blog, which you can win some prizes with as well. But it's really fun to play with and to get inspired by. Each challenge has a theme. This month's theme is stripes, so I will do a striped background as well. But they also always include a color palette to use. Or to get inspired by, and they match it with the closest inks in their collection, so that's really fun as well. And I'm using those inks except for the light pink. The ink they recommended was Ballet Slipper, that's their lightest ink, but if you dilute that with water it's basically invisible, so I used one shade darker. I did speed up this coloring process a lot and I cut out some parts as well. I wish I could show you the entire thing, but it's a lot of the same things over and over again. I painted every single petal the same way, so maybe it wasn't worth showing all of that. And I spent almost 50 minutes coloring this entire piece. So that was a lot to include in one video, but I had a lot of fun doing it, so I didn't mind spending the time on it. The green they chose for this challenge was olive, and it's a beautiful green. I am going to use it a lot more after discovering it today, but I did add a darker green as well for some extra shading. I will do that in the second layer. If you don't know yet, I always watercolor in layers so I can deepen up the shadows and add some depth to my coloring. As you can see, I now have 2 pools of green on my makeshift palette, and the second pool is also olive, but mixed in with a little bit of Evergreen ink. This is from the blue-green range, so I didn't want to add too much to it, but it is considerably darker than the olive, so it does add a lot of depth to my coloring. This really shows how much of a difference a second layer of paint makes. I think the leaves look very flat until you add that second layer of darker green. To use the other colors in the challenge, I decided to color in the stripes with purple, pink, and red, which obviously isn't very natural, but I love how it turned out. I can't imagine this flower in any different way now. Now for the background, I told you I was going to do stripes, and I'm using the same inks and a flat brush. These are quite watered down, so they're a little bit more muted. I didn't want the background to overtake my flower because I spent ages on it. And also I added a lot more water because I wanted the inks to flow. To get them to move around and blend a little, I sprayed on some water, dabbed some off with a clean cloth, then did the other side, and then I add some more paint or ink. Now I did think this background, as it was now, was a little bit too flat and too light, too washed out. So I heat set it and I will add a second coat, and this time with a round brush to create some more paint-like splatter. And whenever the colors are mixing a little bit too much, like that green and purple, that's just living on the edge right there, because green and purple make awful colors together. So whenever those were blending a little bit too much, I dabbed it away with the cloth. To add some splatter, I am using Finetec Gold paint, and I'm also using the darkest color in the palette, which was purple. Now I used the Slimline banner die set, also by Pinkfresh Studio, to cut out my flower image. And sometimes the die leaves a little impression of like the inside of the die cut. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that right, but there's sometimes a little impression just off the edge of the die. And I'm following that with a fine paintbrush and some more of that gold metallic paint. This will make the flower stand out a little bit more from the background when it's framed by the gold paint. For the sentiment strip, I am trying something new. I am loving all the foiling that everyone is doing, but I don't have a foiling system yet. So I'm using some metallic cardstock. I picked a gold that matched the gold paint the best. So this is kind of an orangey, but it matches the paint, so that's what I went with. And I'm prepping that cardstock very well with my anti-static powder bag. Metallic cardstock is even more staticky than normal cardstock, so you really want to prep it well if you want to do heat embossing on it. You also want to make sure your heat tool is really hot, because this is basically plastic that you're embossing on, and you will burn it, you will warp it, it will be unusable if your heat tool is on it for more than a couple of seconds. So I'm embossing a sentiment from the stamp set in white embossing powder, bright white superfine embossing powder, and then I heat set that off screen very quickly. To put this card together, I simply adhered the background with some liquid glue. I'm using the Barely Arts Precision Craft Glue, and I'm adhering that onto a card base. I'm then putting foam tape. I will add 2 layers of foam tape to add more dimension behind this little tag I created. And then that will be propped up nicely from the background. I'm using 2 layers of foam tape. I don't do this often. I know I've done it in the past couple of videos, but I usually don't. I did it this time because I used all the same colors in the focal point and the background, and I wanted to do as much as possible to make the focal point stand out from the background. I'm layering 4 strips of white cardstock together to add behind my sentiment strip and to give it some extra dimension. You could use foam tape or foam squares for this, but I find this is the sturdiest, and especially for sentiment strips, I really like this method. Of course, I have to make a matching envelope, but this one is super simple. I'm just following the directions on the punch board to make an A2 sized envelope. And this is Clairefontaine DCP 250 GSM cardstock. It's really nice bright white cardstock, super smooth, and it takes the ink well. I'm using that same large flower stamp, and this is what I love about large floral images. You really only need one to fill a large space, to fill a full card front if you want, or to fill an envelope. I set it slightly offset, so it's hanging over the edge of the envelope, and I'm stamping that in the Coral Reef ink. This is not an ink I used in the painting that I did, but I thought that it still matched the colors better when stamped than the pink ink did when I stamped it out. I just assembled that with some more of that Barely Art Precision Craft glue, and that's it. That's the envelope and the card all done. I am loving this color combination. I know I didn't come up with it myself, but it's absolutely genius. And this is exactly why I love playing along with challenges. You discover some new things, try some new techniques. I love it. Anyway, I hope you liked this card. If you did, make sure to leave a thumbs up to this video and leave your thoughts in the comments below because I would love to read them. And of course, you can also subscribe to my channel if you want to see more of my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.